The colony of Arendor floated like a fragile jewel at the edge of explored space. Its vast fields of golden crops and sprawling cities were once symbols of human progress, proof that humanity could thrive even in the harshest corners of the galaxy. But now, those same fields were scorched black and the cities lay in ruins. The air was thick with smoke, and the skies buzzed ominously with alien life. For months, the Vraks had been attacking without mercy. These insectoid creatures moved in swarms so large they blotted out the sun. Their chitinous bodies gleamed like polished metal under the dim light of Arendor's twin moons, and their razor-sharp limbs tore through walls as if they were paper. Worst of all, the Vraks didn't just fight, they consumed. They devoured everything in their path, leaving behind barren wastelands where thriving communities once stood. Governor Jae-hyun paced back and forth in his command center, a bunker buried deep beneath what used to be the capital city. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Around him, officers scrambled to coordinate defenses, but it was clear they were losing hope. The colony's soldiers were exhausted, their weapons running low on ammunition. Civilians huddled underground, praying for salvation that seemed impossible to come by. "We can't hold out much longer," Captain Ji-yoon said, her voice tight with frustration. She stood beside Jae-hyun, her uniform stained with dirt and sweat. "If we don't get reinforcements soon, this entire colony will fall." Jae-hyun nodded grimly. He knew she was right. For weeks, he'd been sending desperate messages to the Galactic Federation, begging for aid. But every response came too late, or promised help that never arrived. The Federation was stretched thin, dealing with crises across dozens of systems. Arendor was just one more problem on a growing list. Just when despair threatened to overwhelm him, a new message crackled over the comms system. It wasn't from the Federation. It was from someone else entirely. The screen flickered to life, displaying a symbol Jae-hyun didn't recognize, a jagged circle surrounded by flames. Beneath it, text scrolled in stark white letters. "Your request for assistance has been received. Reinforcements are en route. Expect arrival within 48 hours. Signed, Deathworld Coalition." The room fell silent. No one had heard of the Deathworld Coalition before. Some whispered nervously about mercenaries, others speculated about rogue factions operating outside Federation control. Whatever they were, they sounded dangerous. "Do we trust them?" Ji-yoon asked, her brow furrowed. "What choice do we have?" Jae-hyun replied. "At this point, I'll take anyone willing to fight." 48 hours passed in agony. Every second felt like an eternity as the colonists braced themselves for whatever or whoever was coming. Finally, 3 ships descended from orbit, their hulls battered and scarred as if they'd survived countless battles. They landed outside the bunker, kicking up clouds of dust that obscured the view. When the dust settled, 4 figures stepped out. The first was a man named Hae-sung. His armor was dented and scratched, covered in patches that suggested it had seen better days. A jagged scar ran down the left side of his face, cutting through his cheekbone and disappearing into his beard. His dark eyes scanned the area with practiced precision, taking in every detail. Behind him followed Mi-kyung, a woman with short-cropped hair and a sniper rifle slung casually over her shoulder. Her expression was unreadable, her gaze cold and distant. Next came Jin-seok, a wiry man with a devilish grin plastered across his face. He carried a massive bag filled with explosives, which he patted affectionately as if it were a pet. Bringing up the rear was Soo-jin, who looked deceptively calm compared to the others. Her hands rested lightly on the hilts of 2 curved blades, strapped to her hips, ready to draw at a moment's notice. The colonists watched in stunned silence as the newcomers approached. There was something unsettling about them, not just their appearance, but the way they carried themselves. They radiated confidence, yes, but also something darker, something primal. Hae-sung stopped a few feet away from Jae-hyun and saluted sharply. "You called for reinforcements," he said in a gravelly voice. "We're here." Jae-hyun blinked, momentarily speechless. Thank you. Welcome to Arendor." "Save the pleasantries," Hae-sung interrupted. "Show us your defenses. We need to know what we're working with." Captain Ji-yoon stepped forward, eyeing the newcomers warily. "Who exactly are you people?" Hae-sung smirked faintly. "We're survivors. From worlds most humans couldn't last a day on. You might call us experts in staying alive." That explanation did little to reassure the colonists. Still, Jae-hyun gestured toward the bunker entrance. "Follow me. I'll brief you on the situation." Inside, the Deathworlders listened intently as Jae-hyun outlined the colony's plight. Maps of the surrounding area were spread across a table, marked with red zones indicating areas overrun by the Vraks. Hae-sung studied them closely, occasionally nodding or asking sharp questions. Mi-kyung leaned against a wall, arms crossed, while Jin-sok fiddled with one of his gadgets. Soo-jin remained quiet, her sharp eyes darting between the humans as if assessing their worth. When the briefing ended, Hae-sung turned to Jae-hyun. "This is bad," he admitted bluntly, "but not hopeless. First, we fortify your position. Second, we hit them hard enough to slow them down. Third," he paused, glancing at his team. "Third, we find their queen and kill her. That's the only way to end this." Ji-yeon frowned. "And how do you plan to do all that? We barely have enough supplies to keep ourselves fed, let alone launch some grand offensive." Hae-sung shrugged. "We adapt. That's what we do best." Over. The next few hours, the Deathworlders sprang into action. Hae-sung barked orders, directing colonists to reinforce weak points in the perimeter. Mi-kyung climbed to the top of a ruined tower, setting up her sniper nest. Below, Jin-sok rigged crude traps using scrap metal and leftover explosives. Soo-jin patrolled the camp, offering medical aid to the injured and quietly observing the dynamics among the colonists. Despite their efficiency, tensions began to rise. Many of the colonists were uneasy around the newcomers, unsure whether to trust them. Rumors spread quickly, stories of Deathworlders massacring entire settlements, of their brutal tactics and unyielding nature. Even Ji-eun found herself questioning their motives. "You think they're really here to help us?" she asked Jae-hyun during a rare moment of privacy. He sighed heavily. "I don't know, but right now they're the only chance we've got." As night fell, the colony prepared for another attack. The Deathworlders worked tirelessly, ensuring everyone was ready for what was to come. Hae-sung gathered the colonists for a final pep talk, his voice steady and commanding. "The Vraks are strong," he told them. "They're fast, they're relentless, and they outnumber us, but they're not invincible. If we stand together, if we fight smart, we can win. Remember, survival isn't about strength alone. It's about determination. It's about refusing to give up, no matter how bad things get." His words struck a chord with many of the colonists. For the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope, a fragile spark that refused to die. Hours later, the attack came. The ground trembled as thousands of Vraks surged toward the colony, their chittering cries echoing like a death knell. Lights flashed across the battlefield as gunfire erupted, illuminating the chaos. The Deathworlders fought with savage efficiency, their movements precise and calculated. Hae-sung led the charge, wielding a heavy blade with deadly skill. Mi-kyung picked off enemies from afar, each shot finding its mark with lethal accuracy. Jin-seok detonated trap after trap, sending waves of Vraks flying into the air. And Soo-jin danced through the fray, her blades flashing like streaks of silver. By dawn, the swarm had retreated, leaving behind piles of dead Vraks and shattered remnants of the colony's defenses. Exhausted but victorious, the colonists regrouped, staring in awe at the warriors who had saved them. For now, they were safe. But everyone knew this was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. The morning after the attack was heavy with silence. The colony of Arendor lay battered and bruised, its people nursing wounds both physical and emotional. The air smelled of smoke and blood, and the ground was littered with the broken bodies of Vraks warriors. For the colonists, it was a grim reminder of how close they had come to annihilation, and how much they owed to the four strangers who had arrived just in time. Hae-sung stood near the edge of the perimeter, his scarred face unreadable as he stared out at the horizon. Mi-kyung perched on the remains of a crumbling wall, cleaning her sniper rifle with meticulous care. Jin-seok wandered among the wreckage, poking at debris and muttering to himself about better traps next time. Sujin moved quietly through the camp, tending to the injured and ensuring everyone had enough water and food. Despite their calm exteriors, there was an unspoken tension among them, a shared understanding that this fight was far from over. Captain, Ji-eun approached Hae-sung cautiously. She still wasn't sure what to make of him or his team. There was something unsettling about the way they carried themselves, as if they were always prepared for the worst. "We held them off," she said, finally breaking the silence. "But for how long? They'll be back." Hae-sung didn't turn to look at her. "Of course they will. That's what the Varaks do. They don't stop until there's nothing left to take." Ji-eun frowned. "Then what's the plan? You said something about finding their queen. How are we supposed to do that when we can barely defend ourselves here?" Hae-sung finally glanced at her, his dark eyes piercing. "First, we make sure you can defend yourselves. Then, we go after her." "And how exactly are we supposed to prepare for that?" Ji-eun pressed. "These people aren't soldiers. Most of them have never even held a weapon before." Hae-sung smirked faintly. "That's why we're here." Over the next few days, the Deathworlders took charge of training the colonists. Hae-sung led grueling drills designed to push the humans beyond their limits. He barked orders like a drill sergeant, forcing them to run laps, practice marksmanship, and learn hand-to-hand combat. Many of the colonists complained bitterly about the harsh regimen, but Hae-sung didn't care. "If you want to live," he growled during one particularly intense session, "you'll do what I say." Mi-kyung focused on teaching the recruits how to shoot. She paired each person with a partner and made them practice until their aim improved. Her patience was razor-thin, and she didn't hesitate to scold anyone who wasted ammunition. But beneath her icy exterior, there was a flicker of pride whenever someone hit their target. One young woman, Yoon-ji, showed particular promise. She was quiet and reserved, but her steady hands and sharp eye caught Mi-kyung's attention. "Not bad," Mi-kyung said after watching Yoon-ji take down a distant target. It was the closest thing to praise any of the colonists had heard from. Her Jin-seok, meanwhile, turned his attention to fortifying the colony. He rigged booby traps around the perimeter, using whatever materials he could scavenge. His explosive devices ranged from simple tripwires to elaborate pressure plates hidden beneath piles of rubble. Though his methods were unconventional and occasionally alarming, they added an extra layer of defense that gave the colonists some much-needed peace of mind. "Boom," he muttered under his breath as he tested one of his creations, the resulting explosion sending a flock of birds scattering into the sky. Sujin worked tirelessly to keep everyone healthy and strong. She patched up injuries, distributed medicine, and offered words of encouragement to those struggling with fear or exhaustion. But she also taught the colonists how to use knives and other close combat weapons. Her movements were fluid and precise, making even the simplest techniques look deadly. "A blade is only as good as the person holding it," she told a group of nervous recruits. "Focus, breathe, strike." Despite their efforts, tensions between the Deathworlders and the colonists continued to simmer. Some of the humans admired the newcomers' skill and determination, but others remained wary. Rumors spread about the Deathworlders' past exploits, stories of entire planets laid waste, of villages reduced to ash. Captain Ji-eun tried to ignore the gossip, but it gnawed at her. Were these warriors truly allies, or were they just another kind of threat? Her doubts deepened during a scouting mission outside the colony walls. Hae-sung had insisted on gathering intelligence about the Vrax's movements, and Ji-eun accompanied him along with a small team. As they crept through the ruins of a nearby settlement, the evidence of destruction was overwhelming. Buildings had been torn apart, vehicles crushed like tin cans, and remnants of Vrax carapaces littered the streets. Suddenly, Mi-kyung motioned for them to stop. From her vantage point on a rooftop, she spotted movement in the distance, a swarm of Vrax advancing toward their position. Without hesitation, she began picking off scouts with her sniper rifle, each shot echoing like thunder in the eerie stillness. Jin-seok quickly set up improvised explosives along the road, while Sujin readied her blades, crouching low behind a pile of rubble. When the main force arrived, chaos erupted. The Vrax charged forward with terrifying speed, their chittering cries filling the air. Ji-eun fired her rifle as steadily as she could, but her hands trembled with fear. Beside her, Hae-sung fought with brutal efficiency, his blade slicing through enemy after enemy. Soo-jin leapt into the fray, moving faster than Ji-eun thought possible. Her knives flashed in the dim light, cutting down Vrak's warriors with surgical precision. For a moment, Ji-eun froze, overwhelmed by the sheer brutality of the scene. Then she felt a sharp tug on her arm. "Move!" Hae-sung shouted, pulling her out of harm's way just as Vrax pounced where she had been standing. Heart-pounding, Ji-eun forced herself to focus. She raised her rifle again and fired, hitting her mark. Eventually, the ambush succeeded in driving the swarm back, but not without cost. 2 colonists had been killed, and several others were injured. Back at the colony, the survivors regrouped, shaken but alive. Ji-eun couldn't shake the image of Hae-sung's cold expression as he surveyed the battlefield. He hadn't hesitated to put himself in danger to save her, but there was no warmth in his actions, only calculation. Later that evening, Ji-eun confronted him in private. "Why did you risk your life for me out there?" she demanded. "You barely know me." Hae-sung shrugged. "Because losing you would mean losing leadership, and right now your people need someone to follow." His answer frustrated her. "Is that all I am to you? A tool?" "No," Hae-sung replied, his tone softening slightly. "You're a fighter. Maybe not yet, but you will be. Trust me, I've seen it before." Ji-eun wanted to argue, but something in his gaze stopped her. For the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath his hardened exterior. Whatever horrors he and his team had faced, they carried them like invisible weights. Perhaps, she realized, they weren't so different from the colonists after all. As the days passed, the bond between the humans and the Deathworlders grew stronger. The colonists began to trust their strange allies, seeing them not as monsters but as teachers. Even Ji-eun found herself warming to Hae-sung, though she still questioned his methods. During one late-night conversation, she asked him about the Death World Coalition. "What is it exactly?" she said. "Who are you people?" Hae-sung hesitated, then sighed. "We're from worlds that would kill most humans within hours, places where survival isn't guaranteed. It's earned. We've learned to adapt, to endure. That's why we're here. Because if anyone can handle this mess, it's us." Ji-eun nodded slowly. "And what happens when the Vraks are gone? Will you stay?" Hae-sung shook his head. "No. Once the job's done, we move on. There's always another fight somewhere else." His words sent a pang of sadness through Ji-eun, but she understood. These warriors weren't meant to settle down. They were born to battle. Still, she couldn't help feeling grateful for their presence. Without them, the colony would already be lost. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the colony prepared for another night of vigilance. The Deathworlders stood watch alongside the colonists, their silhouettes outlined against the fading light. For now they were united, not just as allies, but as survivors determined to protect their fragile corner of the galaxy. The days blurred together as the colony of Arendor transformed into a fortress under the relentless guidance of the Deathworlders. Every waking moment was spent preparing for the inevitable next attack, and the humans who had once been farmers, engineers, or teachers were now soldiers in training. The change was hard, but necessary. Hae-sung's drills became harsher, his voice louder, his patience thinner. He pushed the colonists to their limits, shouting orders that left them breathless and sore. Yet despite the exhaustion, there was progress. The recruits learned to move faster, aim better, and think quicker. Mi-kyung worked tirelessly with her group of sharpshooters, turning raw nerves into steady hands. She spent hours teaching Yoonji how to read the battlefield, how to anticipate enemy movements, and when to pull the trigger. "You're not just firing a gun," Mi-kyung said one evening as they sat on a rooftop overlooking the darkened plains. "You're deciding who lives and who dies. Don't waste your shot." Yoonji nodded, clutching her rifle tightly. She wasn't sure she'd ever feel ready, but Mi-kyung's confidence in her was growing. For the first time since the attacks began, Yoonji felt like she might actually stand a chance. Jin Seok's explosive traps grew more elaborate with each passing day. He scavenged parts from abandoned vehicles and machinery, piecing together devices that would make even the most seasoned engineer nervous. His reckless energy kept morale high among the colonists. He cracked jokes while wiring bombs and laughed at his own bad puns, but it also made some uneasy. When he accidentally set off one of his traps during a demonstration, sending debris flying into the air, Captain Ji-eun gave him a stern warning. "We don't have resources to waste," she snapped. Jin Seok grinned sheepishly and promised to be more careful, though no one believed him. Su-jin focused on close-quarters combat, teaching the colonists how to defend themselves if the Vraks broke through their defenses. Her lessons were brutal but effective. She paired people up and forced them to spar, emphasizing speed and precision over brute strength. "A knife is only useful if you know where to strike," she told a group of hesitant recruits. "Learn this, and you'll survive longer than you think." Despite the progress, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Some colonists resented the Deathworlder's methods, accusing them of being too harsh or uncaring. Others whispered about the toll the constant fighting was taking on everyone. The nights were restless, filled with nightmares of chittering insects and endless swarms. Even those who admired the Deathworlders couldn't ignore the cracks forming within their ranks. One evening, after another grueling day of training, Hae-sung called a meeting with his team. They gathered in a small room deep inside the bunker, away from prying eyes. The air was heavy with unspoken concerns. "We can't keep going like this," Hae-sung said bluntly, leaning against a table. "These people are breaking. If we push them any harder, they'll snap." Mi-kyung frowned. "What choice do we have? The Vraks aren't going to slow down for us." "I'm not saying we stop," Hae-sung replied. "But we need to give them something to fight for, something bigger." "Than survival," Jin Seok snorted. "Bigger than survival? What's bigger than that?" Hae-sung's gaze hardened. "Hope. Purpose. Right now, they're scared. They see the Vraks as unstoppable. We need to show them otherwise." Su-jin spoke up quietly. "It's not just them. We're carrying our own burdens, too. You've seen it. The way they look at us sometimes. Like we're monsters. Like we're no different from the Vraks." Hae-sung sighed. "I know, but we didn't come here to be liked. We came here to win. That doesn't mean we can't earn their trust," Su-jin countered. "If we want them to follow us into battle, they need to believe in us, not just fear us." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Each of them carried scars, physical and emotional, from their homeworlds. They had survived unimaginable horrors, but that survival had come at a cost. They weren't used to being vulnerable, to letting others see their pain. Yet Su-jin was right. If they wanted the colonists to fight alongside them, they needed to bridge the gap between human and Deathworlder. The next morning, Hae-sung addressed the entire colony. Standing before a crowd of weary faces, he spoke with a clarity that demanded attention. "Listen to me," he began, his voice firm but not unkind. "I know you're tired. I know you're scared. But let me tell you something. Fear is normal. It means you're alive. And as long as you're alive, you still have a chance." He paused, scanning the crowd. "The Vraks are strong. They're fast. They outnumber us. But they don't have what we have. They don't have hope. They don't have purpose. They don't have each other. That's our advantage. That's why we'll win." His words resonated deeply with the colonists. For the first time, many of them saw the Deathworlders not as outsiders, but as fellow fighters, united by a shared goal. The shift was subtle but significant. Trust began to grow, fragile but real. Captain Ji-eun noticed the change immediately. During a late-night patrol, she found herself walking beside Hae-sung. The silence between them was comfortable now, less tense than before. "You really believe what you said earlier?" she asked finally. "That we can win?" Hae-sung glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I've seen worse odds, and I've won." Ji-eun hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. For everything." Hae-sung shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go." As the days passed, the colony continued to prepare for war. The Deathworlders worked alongside the colonists, sharing meals, swapping stories, and building bonds that transcended their differences. Mi-kyung opened up to Yoonji about her childhood on a desolate ice planet, where survival meant hunting predators twice her size. Jin Seok regaled a group of children with exaggerated tales of his past exploits, making them laugh despite their fear. Soo-jin stayed quieter than the others, but her presence was calming, a reminder that strength didn't always come from noise. Even Hae-sung softened slightly, allowing himself brief moments of vulnerability. One night, as he stood guard atop a ruined wall, Ji-yoon joined him. They talked about their fears, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. For the first time, Ji-yoon saw the man behind the warrior, a man burdened by loss but driven by duty. Then, without warning, the Vraks struck again. This time, the attack was fiercer than ever. Thousands of creatures surged toward the colony, their chittering cries drowning out all other sounds. The defenders fought back with everything they had, but the swarm was overwhelming. Explosions rocked the ground as Jin Seok detonated trap after trap, thinning the horde but unable to stop it entirely. Mi-kyung fired until her rifle overheated, her shots finding their marks with lethal accuracy. Soo-jin plunged into the chaos, her blades flashing like streaks of lightning. In the midst of the battle, Ji-eun found herself face-to-face with a massive Vraks warrior. Its jagged limbs gleamed menacingly in the dim light, and its mandibles clicked hungrily. She froze, panic gripping her heart. Then, out of nowhere, Hae-sung appeared, driving his blade into the creature's head. Blood sprayed across both of them as the Vraks collapsed. "Stay sharp!" Hae-sung barked, pulling Ji-yoon to her feet. "We're not done yet!" The fight raged on for hours, each side refusing to yield. By dawn, the Vraks retreated once more, leaving behind piles of dead bodies and shattered defenses. Exhausted but victorious, the colonists regrouped, staring in awe at the warriors who had saved them yet again. For now, they were safe. But everyone knew the real battle was still ahead. The Vraks queen loomed in the distance, a symbol of the threat that refused to die. The Deathworlders exchanged grim looks, knowing the hardest part was yet to come. As the sun rose over Arendor, casting golden light across the battered landscape, the colonists took a moment to catch their breath. They had survived another night, thanks to the strangers who had become their allies, and perhaps their friends. The colony of Arendor was quieter than usual, but the calm felt deceptive, like the eye of a storm. The colonists were battered and bruised, their spirits worn thin by relentless attacks and sleepless nights. Yet, there was a new sense of purpose. In the air, a fragile hope born from the bond between humans and Deathworlders. The recent victory against the Vraks swarm had proven that they could fight back, even if the cost was high. But everyone knew it wasn't enough. To truly end the threat, they had to strike at the heart of the enemy. Hae-sung stood in the command bunker, staring at a crude map spread across the table. His scarred face was unreadable, but his clenched fists betrayed his tension. Around him, Captain Ji-yoon, Mi-kyung, Jin Seok, Soo-jin, and a handful of colonist leaders gathered, their expressions grim. The plan was simple, yet perilous. Infiltrate the Vraks hive, locate the queen, and destroy her. Without their leader, the swarm would fall into disarray, giving the colony a chance to recover. "It's suicide," Ji-yoon said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "Even with your skills, we'll never make it out alive." Hae-sung glanced at her, his dark eyes sharp. "Maybe, but staying here is just waiting to die. At least this way, we have a shot." Ji-eun opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She couldn't deny the truth in his words. Staying put meant eventual defeat. Going after the queen was their only chance, no matter how slim. Mi-kyung leaned forward, pointing to a spot on the map. "This is where the hive is located, deep underground, surrounded by tunnels. If we can get inside without being detected, I can cover us from above while you move in." "And how exactly do we avoid detection?" Ji-yeon asked skeptically. "Those things are everywhere." "That's where Jin Seok comes in," Hae-sung replied, nodding toward the wiry man who was fiddling with one of his explosives. "He'll create diversions to draw them away from the entrance. Once we're inside, it's up to all of us to stay alive long enough to reach the queen," Soo-jin added quietly. "The tunnels will be tight and dark. We'll need to move fast and stay quiet. Any noise will bring the swarm down on us." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the plan. It was risky, almost reckless, but none of them doubted its necessity. Survival wasn't about playing it safe. It was about taking chances when the odds seemed impossible. The next morning, the strike team prepared to leave. Hae-sung led the group, his heavy blade strapped to his back. Beside him walked Ji-eun, her rifle slung over her shoulder and determination etched onto her face. Mi-kyung carried her sniper rifle, ready to provide cover from a distance, while Jin-seok lugged a bag filled with explosives, grinning despite the danger ahead. Soo-jin brought up the rear, her twin blades gleaming in the pale light. Joining them were several trained colonists, including Yoon-ji, whose steady hands and sharp aim had earned her a place in the mission. As they moved through the ruins toward the hive, the landscape grew increasingly alien. The ground was littered, with discarded carapaces and strange, pulsating pods that oozed a sticky resin. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the distant chittering of vraks echoed like a haunting melody. Every step felt heavier, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them. When they reached the edge of the hive, Jin-seok set to work rigging traps around the perimeter. He planted small charges designed to explode in sequence, creating a chain reaction that would draw the swarm away from the entrance. As he worked, Mi-kyung climbed to a nearby ridge, setting up her sniper nest. From her vantage point, she could see the hive's towering spires rising from the earth like jagged teeth. "Ready when you are," Jin-seok called out, giving Hae-sung a thumbs up. Hae-sung nodded. "Do it!" With a flick of a switch, Jin-seok detonated the first charge. A loud boom echoed across the plains, followed by another and another. The explosions sent shockwaves rippling through the ground, shaking loose rocks and debris. Almost immediately, the sound of scuttling feet filled the air as Vrak's warriors poured out of the hive, drawn to the commotion. "Go!" Hae-sung ordered, motioning for the team to move. They slipped into the shadows of the entrance, disappearing into the dark maw of the hive. Inside, the tunnels were narrow and suffocating, the walls slick with slime. Strange, bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow, illuminating the path ahead. The air was humid and rank, making it hard to breathe. Every sound, the drip of liquid, the skittering of unseen creatures, set their nerves on edge. "We need to keep moving," Hae-sung whispered, his voice barely audible. "If we stop, we're dead." They pressed on, navigating the labyrinthine passages with care. At one point, Yoon-ji spotted movement in the shadows. Before anyone could react, a Vrak's scout lunged at her, its mandibles snapping hungrily. Soo-jin stepped in front of her, her blades flashing in a blur of motion. The creature collapsed in pieces, its body dissolving into a puddle of green ooze. "Stay close," Soo-jin murmured, wiping her blades clean. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were alert, scanning the darkness for more threats. Deeper into the hive, the tunnels widened into cavernous chambers filled with writhing masses of larvae. The sight was horrifying. Pulsating sacs clinging to the walls, each containing a developing Vrak's warrior. The team moved quickly, trying not to disturb the fragile ecosystem, but their footsteps echoed loudly, drawing unwanted attention. A group of Vrak's workers appeared, their smaller forms less aggressive than the warriors but still dangerous in numbers. Ji-eun raised her rifle, firing precise shots that dropped the creatures before they could swarm. "Keep moving," she urged, her voice tight with urgency. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew hotter, tinged with the acrid smell of chemicals. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the hive itself were alive. Finally, they reached the central chamber, a vast, domed space dominated by a monstrous figure suspended in a cocoon of webbing. "The Queen!" Hae-sung breathed, his gaze locked on the creature. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of an ordinary Vrak's warrior. Its segmented body shimmered with iridescent colors, and its multiple eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence. Thick tendrils of silk anchored it to the ceiling, feeding nutrients directly into its bloated form. Jin-seok grinned, pulling a large explosive device from his bag. "Time to light this candle." But before he could plant the bomb, the Queen stirred. With a deafening screech, it tore free from its cocoon, sending waves of silk cascading to the floor. Smaller Vrak's warriors emerged from hidden alcoves, surrounding the team and cutting off their escape. Plan B? Ji-eun asked, raising her rifle. No time, Hae-sung replied, drawing his blade. Fight your way to the queen. Take her down no matter what. The battle erupted in chaos. The Vraks swarmed, their chittering cries filling the chamber. Soo-jin darted through the fray, her blades slicing through enemies with deadly precision. Hae-sung charged straight at the queen, dodging its snapping limbs and striking with brutal force. Ji-eun fired steadily, picking off warriors that got too close. Yoonji stayed near Mi-kyung, covering her as she aimed for critical targets. Jin Seok fought his way toward the queen, planting the bomb at its base. Got it! He shouted, activating the timer. We've got 3 minutes! Fall back! Hae-sung yelled, hacking at a Vrax that lunged at him. The team retreated toward the tunnel, fighting desperately to hold off the swarm. The queen thrashed wildly, its dying screams shaking the entire chamber. As they reached the exit, Soo-jin turned back, noticing one of the colonists struggling to escape. Without hesitation, she ran back, grabbing the injured man and dragging him to safety. By the time she rejoined the group, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Move! Hae-sung barked, pushing everyone forward. They sprinted through the tunnels as the explosion rocked the hive, sending chunks of rock crashing down around them. Behind them, the queen's lair collapsed in a fiery inferno, sealing the fate of the swarm. When they emerged into daylight, the survivors collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. Their armor was dented, their bodies bruised and bloodied, but they were alive. The hive burned behind them, its destruction a testament to their courage and their sacrifice. Ji-eun looked at Hae-sung, her expression a mix of gratitude and sorrow. We did it, she said softly. Hae-sung nodded, his face grim. For now, but there's always another fight. As the sun rose over Arendor, casting golden light across the battered landscape, the colonists took a moment to mourn their losses and celebrate their victory. The Deathworlders stood apart, watching silently. They had done their job, but their journey was far from over. For now, though, they allowed themselves a rare moment of peace, knowing they had given these people a chance to rebuild. The destruction of the Vrax Queen marked a turning point for the colony of Arendor. But it was far from the end. The hive's collapse sent shockwaves through the swarm, leaving the remaining creatures disoriented and leaderless. Without their queen to guide them, the Vrax began retreating into the wilderness, scattering like leaves in the wind. For the first time in months, the colonists dared to hope that they might survive. But survival came at a cost. The strike team returned to the colony battered and broken, their bodies bearing the scars of battle. Hae-sung limped as he walked, his armor cracked and stained with blood. Soo-jin carried one of the injured colonists over her shoulder, her face pale with exhaustion. Ji-eun supported Yoonji, whose leg had been badly wounded during the escape. Even Jin Seok, who usually wore a grin no matter how dire the situation, looked grim as he clutched his side where a Vrax claw had grazed him. The colonists greeted them with cheers, tears streaming down their faces as they realized the nightmare was finally over. Governor Jae-hyun stepped forward, his voice trembling with emotion. You saved us, he said, looking at the Deathworlders. We owe you everything. Hae-sung shook his head. Don't thank us yet. There's still work to be done. And he was right. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, the colony was still in ruins. Buildings lay in shambles, crops were destroyed, and supplies were dangerously low. The survivors faced the daunting task of rebuilding their homes and lives from scratch. It would take time, effort, and resilience, qualities the Deathworlders had instilled in them during their brief stay. Over the next few days, the Deathworlders helped the colonists begin the process of recovery. Mi-kyung taught Yoonji and other recruits how to patrol the perimeter, ensuring the remnants of the Vrax didn't regroup. Jin Seok used his explosives expertise to clear debris and fortify key areas of the colony. Soo-jin worked tirelessly, in the medical tents treating injuries and comforting those who had lost loved ones. And Hae-sung oversaw the overall efforts, his presence a constant reminder of what they had endured and what they could achieve if they stayed united. Despite their contributions, the Deathworlders remained outsiders in many ways. The colonists admired their skills and bravery, but there was an unspoken understanding that these warriors came from a different world, one far harsher and more unforgiving than Arendor. Conversations about their pasts were rare, and when they did happen, they were brief and guarded. One evening, after a long day of rebuilding, Ji-un found herself sitting beside Hai-sung near the edge of the colony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She handed him a canteen of water, which he accepted with a nod of thanks. "You never told me much about your homeworld," she said, after a moment of silence. "What's it like?" Hae-sung took a sip of water before answering. His expression was thoughtful, distant. "It's hard. The air is thin, the ground cracks underfoot, and the storms can strip flesh from bone. Most people don't last a week there. Those who do learn quickly that weakness means death." Ji-un frowned. "That sounds terrible." "It is," Hae-sung admitted. "But it also makes you strong. You learn to adapt, to endure. Every breath feels like a victory because you know how easily it could be taken away." She stared at him, trying to imagine living in such a place. "Do you miss it?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No. I left because I wanted something better, for myself, for others. But I carry it with me wherever I go. It's part of who I am." Ji-un nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She couldn't fully understand what it meant to live on a death world, but she respected his strength and the sacrifices he had made to help people like her. As the days passed, the bond between the humans and the Deathworlders grew stronger. They shared meals, told stories, and laughed together despite the hardships. Mi-kyung opened up to Yoon-ji about her younger brother, who had died protecting their village during a volcanic eruption. Jin-seok entertained children with tales of his adventures, though most of them were likely exaggerated. Soo-jin stayed quieter than the others, but her actions spoke louder than words. She cared for the injured, comforted the grieving, and offered guidance to anyone who needed it. Even Hae-sung softened slightly, allowing himself moments of vulnerability. He sat with Ji-un late at night, talking about their fears, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. For the first time, she saw him not just as a warrior, but as a man burdened by loss, yet driven by duty. Eventually, the time came for the Deathworlders to leave. Their mission was complete, and they had other battles to fight elsewhere. On the morning of their departure, the entire colony gathered to say goodbye. The atmosphere was bittersweet, filled with gratitude but tinged with sadness. Governor Jae-hyun approached Hae-sung, extending his hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "We'll never forget what you've done for us." Hae-sung shook his hand firmly. "Take care of each other. That's all we ask." Ji-un stepped forward next, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Will we ever see you again?" she asked softly. Hae-sung smiled faintly. "Probably not. But remember this. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about refusing to give up, no matter how bad things get. You've got that in you now." She nodded, swallowing hard. "We'll make sure Arendor thrives. That's our promise to you." With that, the Deathworlders boarded their ships, their battered hulls gleaming faintly in the sunlight. As the engines roared to life, the colonists waved until the vessels disappeared into the sky. Though they were gone, their legacy remained, a testament to courage, determination, and the power of unity. In the weeks and months that followed, the colony of Arendor began to heal. Crops were replanted, buildings were rebuilt, and life slowly returned to normal. The colonists remembered the lessons they had learned from the Deathworlders: how to fight, how to adapt, and most importantly, how to hope. Captain Ji-un stood atop a newly constructed watchtower one evening, gazing out at the horizon. The fields stretched endlessly before her, golden and alive with promise. Behind her, laughter echoed from the streets below as families celebrated another day of peace. She felt a pang of sadness thinking about the Deathworlders, but also a deep sense of pride. They had given the colony a second chance, and she was determined to honor that gift. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Ji-un whispered a silent thank you to the warriors who had saved them. Though they were light years away, their spirit lived on in every heart that beat within Arendor's walls, and so the colony moved forward, not just as survivors, but as fighters ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.